Hi, my name is Ashley Fay, and I'm the Development Director at Refugee Services of Texas. I'm here today with Miranda Roberts, my colleague at RST, who is our Marketing and Communications Manager. I'm also here with Lori, who is the director of an amazing film that hopefully you've had the chance to watch or have the chance to watch, Day One. And I also have Donnie, the principal at the school featured in the film, and Kelly Moore, an educator at the same institution. So we'll go ahead and jump into our questions. Lori, can you start by summarizing the documentary without giving too much away in case folks haven't had a chance to watch it yet, and then sharing a little bit about what drove you to create this film?
Okay. I would say the film, to me, is a hopeful and inspirational story about how, caring people who are highly trained in helping this community can really make a difference in their lives. Which is why I'm really glad that Kelly and Donnie are here to talk about this. So the film is kind of a sort of a loose compilation of a year in the life of some students and educators and also community organizers in St. Louis. We filmed during the year of the presidential election when Donald Trump was elected, so we also touch on some of the political factors going on for these for the refugees and how the political climate affected these families. But mostly we try to just show a really positive model of how to help this community and really dealing with some of the war traumas that they experience and then helping them to go on and lead really wonderful, productive lives. So I think that's a sort of a summary. I forgot the second question. I think there was another one. Oh, you're muted.
Myself, so sorry about that. So I was asking what led you to create this film?
Oh, okay. So I have an old friend named Peter Tao, who is a community organizer. He's also an architect in St. Louis, and he's a first generation Chinese American and works very, very closely with the refugee resettlement community in St. Louis. And we had kept in touch over the years, and he introduced me to the subject. For me, as a filmmaker, one of the things that drew me to this was just my lack of knowledge of refugee resettlement in the United States. And it was just fascinating for me as a filmmaker to be in this community and to be invited into this community and to really observe firsthand, just turn the camera on and just observe, to me, something that I found very, very surprising and unique. And that's always a filmmaker's dream, is to be brought in to a world that you know nothing about. So it was just, every day was suspenseful and interesting to me.
That's great, thank you. Donnie, so the tagline, if you will, of the film is 56 languages, 42 countries, and 1 community. I feel like that describes Refugee Services of Texas as well. So you were the principal of the school at the time of filming. Can you tell us what is unique about the school and what impact the school makes on the community?
So I think I'm glad you mentioned that tagline. I think that in itself, as you said, is very unique in that we had one place to serve all of the newcomers. I think what was very unique is the fact that we had grades kindergarten through 10th grade all housed on the same campus. Families could feel safe. The older children could come on the bus with their younger children. So it became a community because I think the unique thing about the age groups, the grade levels, and of course the parent involvement, the great team, I think our students impacted us and the neighborhood. I mean, I think the community, that's a good question. I'm not sure if the community always knew about us. I really think that as a result of Lori making this documentation, this documentary, I have so much documentation in my head, documentary, I think I don't think St. Louis knew about us as much as we thought, but our community partners knew about us. So I think it impacted the neighborhood or the community by showing how we can embrace all. We can embrace all the differences, the likenesses, and make a better community instead of they're different and they should be over there. I think that we showed the community what world peace, world love, even global education could look like. That's what I think.
I think you're right. I think it serves as an amazing example, and I'm so glad that the story has been told and is accessible to other communities throughout the world. Kelly, as an educator at this school, what drew you to work at this school in particular, and what makes it special to you?
I started my career working with English language learners. My very first year teaching, I taught in our district's very first newcomer program. So when this position opened up, I was super excited to come back and work with newcomers again. I had worked with Donnie in the past, so I was super excited about working with her. And I just love the community. I love the immigrant community here in St. Louis. I feel like there's such a big need in this community, and I just was really excited to get back involved with it.
That's great. I love your background, actually. Can you tell us a little bit? Oh, I think your lights went on.
I want to jump. Oh, can I jump in for a sec? I just want to mention, and it's revealed in the film that Kelly is actually now the principal as we move forward in time.
Right.
So.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, Kelly? Are those some of the pieces that your students might have made?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Oh, I was just asking about your background. Is the artwork some pieces that you were?
Oh, okay. Yes, they are different pieces that different students have brought in. We have a very diverse staff who travels a lot. So they know I love stuff like this. I love having like representation from all over the world. So whenever anybody goes anywhere, they tend to bring something back for me.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Lori, during the filming, the political situation changed dramatically, and as a result, resettlement became more of a divisive, partisan issue in this country. And really for the first time in a lot of ways, what was the impact that you saw on the school, and how did that impact your film?
Well, I think the main way that it impacted the film was that we started out sort of on a slow schedule. We thought we would just do some research and see if we could get access and find some interesting people to cover. And always when you're telling a story and to sustain for, over an hour, you kind of need a lot of different parts of a puzzle. You need suspense, beginning, middle, and an end. And, it's always kind of a brain teaser to put a story together. So when we first started, we didn't really have a schedule or an end in mind, and we were even just doing research. But as soon as the election happened, the work felt very urgent to myself and my partner, my work partner. His name is Brian O'Connell, who I want to mention. Donnie and Kelly, know him well. He also was one of the producers and the cinematographer. And I think together, just in our minds, it just clicked the minute Donald Trump was elected that the story was very urgent and we needed to tell it right now. And we really, the tone of everything changed. We did, Donnie and Kelly can speak to this in great detail, but there did seem to be a lot of fear amongst the kids in terms of what would happen to them, and would their family members, be able to join them? Would they be deported? Would they be arrested? It was just a terrible feeling to see these kids who had already been traumatized sort of get re-traumatized by the political activities that were going on. Another thing that I really, really wanted to bring out in the film was just how, in a place like St. Louis, that's been resettling refugees for over 100 years. There's this huge infrastructure of people that are trained to help resettle refugees from all over the world, and they're just very gifted people, whether they're the educators or people who work at the International Institute or other organizations, and these jobs were just being slashed as we've watched. And this couldn't be good for the economy as well, you know. So these were some of the things that came up having to do with the political situation while we were.
Thank you. How did you feel that the students reacted, either Donnie or Kelly? How did you see the students and their families react to that kind of newly unfolding political situation?
Students and families were fearful. They were fearful of how they would be treated in St. Louis and the neighborhoods that they lived in. They were fearful that they may be sent back, and they were also fearful. Many of our families, that they made the entire family didn't come at one time, and so some of them were waiting on other family members to come, and so that hopelessness of thinking they'll never get to come and I may never see them. All of this was a part of, you know, what the students were feeling. And I like the way, you know, I think the re-traumatized, I think that's a big word. So they were experiencing trauma again. I had an amazing team, and we had a trauma, a trainer, and we had social workers and counselors. We were able, and Kelly was the instructional coordinator, so we were able to get like a panel of people. I think there were lawyers. Kelly, you can help me. Legal services came, so students were able to ask questions about what's going on and how that will affect me, how that will affect my parents, and how will it affect my family that's still coming. So we did try to provide answers for them, and just to, you know, pour on the concern, the love, the empathy, and try to ensure them that no one will walk up in our building and do anything. And I really meant that. You won't walk in my building and try to deport somebody or whatever they thought they could do. So we just made it a safe place. So they like to get to school because I think they felt safe. And that was very important. Kelly, you want to add to that, please?
I was just going to say it's an ongoing thing. I mean, even now, as we're getting into, you know, the 4th year of this presidency, our makeup of our school has changed. We have predominantly asylum seekers now as opposed to refugees, as you know, and not nearly as many refugees have been permitted into the country. So for us now, one of the things that we really struggle with is reaching out into the community and getting legal resources for these families, because it's a different makeup of kids. These kids are scared. They're scared they're going to be sent back. They're scared they're going to be picked up by immigration. All of these things are factors right now. So that trauma is ongoing, and dealing with, you know, the trauma from coming here, the trauma from what these kids endured before they even got here. And then to pile on top of that, these feelings that they're not welcome, they're not wanted, that they're not safe here. Those are all really challenging things that we're having to try to work with these kids on.
And may I add, I don't know, Kelly, if you have numbers for both schools, but to think about the impact, we had 588 students on our campus. And now collectively, Kelly, do we have maybe 250 or 180, or do you know?
I don't know how many the elementary and middle school has. Last I heard it was about 200. We were at 120 at the end of last year.
Okay, great. Yeah, but it was reduced greatly. As far as just students being able to come and be in the, come into the city and be enrolled and live in St. Louis, come into the country, basically.
That's a dramatic change, and we've seen a similar change at Refugee Services of Texas. And so one of our big focuses over the past several years has really been to maintain the infrastructure of our organization so that in future administrations, when resettlement increases, we will have the capacity to ramp back up and serve all of these individuals that may not be permitted to come in right now. Is that something that you feel like, Kelly, you have to think about and address for your school when those numbers do pick back up and the population might shift a little bit?
It's hard because I work for a school within a public school district. Our funding is determined by the number of students we currently have. So we may be able to project that we're going to have larger numbers next year, but actually being able to plan and prepare for that is a whole other issue, and there are so many different factors that are going to be impacted by the election in November. I feel like a lot of what we do is serving our kids in the moment with whatever resources we have available and just trying to be prepared for whatever happens tomorrow or the next day, because things change so quickly.
They do. So to get back a little bit to the students that are in the film and students like them, Lori, you've talked about how filming was difficult because you're encountering these traumatic stories of the students, and that some days you had to shut it down early and you had to take those breaks. And so can you talk about some of the students, not the students' particular stories, but in general, kind of their backgrounds and the situations that they're coming from that necessitated their resettlement? Because I do think that's an important piece of advocacy, and that if more people understood that they're not taking advantage of a system and they're not coming because they want to leave their home, right? It's really a forced migration. I think there would be more.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that piece?
Oh, absolutely. And also, I think probably Donnie and Kelly are more expert in this, but this is just as an observer, as a filmmaker. One of the people that we interviewed in the film, her name is Anna Crossland, and she runs the International Institute in St. Louis. And she talks about how being a refugee is not a choice. It's people are forced from their homes. And actually, my mom was a refugee, so that's one of the reasons why I was so drawn to the story. She survived. She was a Holocaust survivor, and a lot of my family did not survive. And this is, an age-old story internationally where there's some kind of hatred from one group toward another group, and they want to kill the other. One group wants to actually literally murder the other group, and you either survive or by escaping, or you don't. And another person featured in the film made a comment that I really resonated with. Her name is Carrie Ritchie, and Donnie and Kelly know her well. She's a very gifted teacher. And she talks about how when these families leave, they lose everything. They lose their neighborhood. They lose their language. They lose their culture. They lose their church. They lose everything. So there's such a deep sense of loss by having to be forced from your home through violent circumstances. So yes, it's very confusing that people would think that this is a choice. It's not a choice. It's people would prefer to live in their house, in their town, in their community, and speak their home language. So hopefully that kind of explains it. But Kelly and Donnie, maybe because they work with these kids all day long, but that was what I picked up they were traumatized from the violence they had experienced. And this is why I thought the school was so special, because they really understood that piece and wanted to help these kids get some kind of emotional stability around this trauma of this loss and violence they had seen.
Donnie and Kelly, do you have anything to add to that? And also, what were the attitudes of the students having started at the school? Because while they don't want, it's not an ideal situation, when they get here, they are grateful and they're excited to be part of the community, and they do integrate and become active members of society, right? So I don't want to make it seem like they're resentful for being here, because that couldn't be farther from the truth, right? So can you talk a little bit about maybe the situations that they're coming from, and also their attitude upon being present in your school?
I think every student's journey here, we assume they're all just alike, but they're not. In the movie, you'll hear about a young man named Haroon, and I think he talked about being on a refugee camp waiting for like 12 years. So it all depends on if they're coming from, a beautiful home where their for instance, the Syrians, they left their homes. They weren't, they lived in beautiful homes. They had things. Then all of a sudden there was this war, and they, were able to come here. But the wait in between is so it's not that they love their homes. I think we kind of sometimes assume that this is much better than what they had. Sometimes it is, but home is home. And so, they missed their homes, but they were grateful. But some of them didn't come directly from their home. They were living in, horrible situations in refugee camps, moving from place to place before they got here. When they got here, there was a lot of trauma, but I do feel that they were grateful once they realized, they would have some of their needs met. I think they were grateful and they were happy at our school, because not just because of what they were getting, or I think they had a home, they felt safe, they were getting an education. And I think that's great, but don't all children deserve that? So yeah, they missed their homes, but they were grateful to be in the United States. And, many of them will stay. And we did all that we could. But I want, it to be understood that when they come here, it's not, I'm sure it's not, all glory. I mean, they have to, we had mothers who never worked before, and they lost their husbands, during the war. And they came, and now what are they going to do? They need to get a job. They don't speak the language. They didn't even work in their own country. So there are a lot of different things that they had to adjust to. And I'm just proud of I'm able to see now some of the students are graduating. They, lived through the COVID and be working virtually. And we have students, one student just got the Neha Chapman Award, a scholarship award. So yeah, some of them are top students in their schools. So as far as I think they're ready for society. I think they're ready to step out and pursue their goals and pursue their dreams, their career and college goals, and just have a successful life. And I do hope that being in our program aided to that. But, students or I think refugee students, immigrant students, children are children. You have those who are very outgoing and they want their education. You have those who are funny and playful and they're still figuring it out. But I do believe that they'll be ready for the society. I think the question is, will society be ready for them to afford, to make sure that they are able to access, or that they get all of the things that they deserve, as far as if they're prepared, will they be able to get those positions? So I think they're ready. I just wonder if society is ready for them. I hope I answered your question.
You did beautifully, and that's our question too, but we'll get there. Kelly, did you have something to add to that?
I was just going to say, for most of these kids, coming here represents the possibility of stability, I guess, and physical safety. So on that level, these kids are, for the most part, very grateful for the opportunity to be here. But like Donnie said, it's a loss. You're losing your culture. You're losing often your extended family when you're coming over here. You're losing everything that you're used to. And even for these students who have lived in refugee camps their entire lives, going from that and then coming here, it's such a huge change. So there's a lot of mixed feelings, and we see those in our kids every day. I mean, one minute these kids are very excited about being at school, and the next minute they're sad because they're talking about home, and home to them may still be wherever they came from. So.
Yep. Lori, what has the response to your documentary been, and has that changed over time? We're seeing it's a new day, even just as of very recently. There's so much going on in terms of this talk about racism and xenophobia, more so out in the open than in a long time. And so have you seen any change in the response to your film?
You know, it's been sort of a slow burn, you know, getting the film out. It's, you know, this subject matter, I think, is not, you know, it's not sensationalist. We're not making a story about famous people, or, you know, it's a quieter story. And so we've been, you know, slowly rolling the film out. And what's interesting to me is that the kinds of venues that have wanted to show the film have been just really, it's been positive all throughout. I think that, you know, as a filmmaker, what was, you know, so exciting to me was to find this kind of gem of a school and surrounding community. You know, all these other people in the film too, like Peter Tao and our Crossland, and but mainly focused on the school and the educators. And I think just showing this particular world to audiences that would want to show up, you know, to this film based on the subject matter has been very, very, very positive. And I think more than anything, it's been very eye-opening to people, as it was to me as a filmmaker. And I think but that's my bigger question, is how to take a story like this and use it to educate a greater swath of the population. Because I think that when people see the film, it's very emotional for them in general, and very, very, very positive. And I think people have preconceived notions in their head about what is a refugee and how will they contribute to society. And so whenever we've been able to, you know, get an entry in a festival or do a special screening or have someone see it at a university or connect with a group like yours, people seem positive. So it's just, it seems like it should be so kind of logical what we're saying in the film, but most people really are unaware of just the rich cultural fabric and the gratefulness of these kids and the brilliance that they can achieve when given some love and an opportunity. So, you know, I hope that answers the question. I haven't come across any negativity
I'm so
throughout.
glad.
Yeah,
It's a beautiful film.
I don't know if Kelly or Donnie has heard anything negative, because it's been screened extensively in St. Louis, the film, you know. And they've been at a lot of events too. So
I totally agree with Lori. I haven't heard anything negative, and I was sharing with someone else that no matter how many times I actually look at the documentary, I'm always brought to tears again, and I already know what it's about. It's very moving. I do think that the way Lori captured the stories of the students, the staff, and some of the parents, I think that it did bring, it maybe reduce some of those misconceptions or stereotypes that people have about refugees and immigrants. And when Lori said, you know, they are wondering what contributions that they will make to society, I think they also are wondering, what am I contributing to those children? What are they getting free that, you know, comes out of my taxes? And so I think clarifying and understanding that, oh, you know, you're not taking care of them for the, you know, for the rest of the year, for the whole year. She brought so many things out that I think because of the understanding of the stories of the children, what they had gone through, and about our staff and Anna Crossland and the International Institute and all of that, I think brought clarity and removed some of that ism, and they were able to see a little bit more clearly that, you know, every person has value. You know, there's no one. I think we've decided who is, you know, we're devaluing humans, and because we're deciding who is worth it and who's not. And I just think that when you look at it, if it doesn't pierce your heart to be more open to diversity, I think that's what it did for most people, and especially for those people who just don't know. They just don't know.
Hey guys, let me jump in before Kelly comments. I just want to say something about what Donna just said. I think one of the benefits about not being an expert, you know, and just turning on the camera and just being naive and asking questions, is that sometimes you can uncover some really basic information that the public is completely unaware. I remember when Brian and I were talking to Betsy Cohen, who runs the St. Louis Mosaic Partnership, which is part of the Economic Development Department in St. Louis. And she was describing to us how brief the benefits are, the financial benefits, the refugees. And this was a complete like bump on the head for us. You know, this is just basic stuff that people don't know. And so it was fascinating to be able to learn this and then to bring it back in to the school where we saw how hard the kids were working. You know, one of the kids, Do Mercy, who I know Kelly's very close with, you know, sleeping 3 hours a night to support his family. So this is the kind of stuff that we, as non-experts, we were allowed to kind of discover through the filmmaking process. So.
Well, that was all I was going to say is that for me, I've noticed so many people who have seen the film just had no awareness that there was this community in St. Louis, that there was this school, that there was this program, the International Institute, that we had a refugee community in St. Louis. I think a lot of times when we talk about an immigrant population, people have it in their head that it's one specific thing, that these people are coming from one specific country and that their backgrounds are all the same. And I just know we recently showed the documentary on a television station here in St. Louis, and my entire neighborhood was calling me afterwards saying, I had no idea this existed. I had no idea that we had this large community in St. Louis. I had no idea that these kids had these stories and this is what they went through. And it's just, that's been the positive for me, is just getting this awareness out there. I feel like in a lot of places, St. Louis included, people live in their own little worlds and they don't see what's happening outside of their neighborhood, their immediate community. And it's been really good to have these conversations with people. People who maybe before weren't necessarily supportive of our immigration policies in the past. These are people wanting to know what's happening now. Do we still have students coming in? How can we support this community? So it's been very positive.
Ashley, can I interrupt really quickly?
Yeah.
In talking about having these conversations with people who had no idea about the programs or really no idea about how refugee resettlement works, and as right now we try to have more uncomfortable conversations about things that we don't know or understand, I would be curious to know what is one unlikely source or place that came to any of you to have that conversation and to really get to know more? Was it with you? Were there any students that you know of who were also able to have conversations that maybe were not normal for them?
Are you saying, just to clarify, are you saying the conversations for the documentary, or are you just saying conversations in general about, are you talking about the conversations where people were informed about refugees and
Yes.
what happens?
I think conversations, yes, about refugee resettlement, about the school, about programs offered, really just anything that people were curious about that they didn't know beforehand, whether it was a faith community or even a business or anywhere like that who may have seen the film that had questions.
Kelly, you want to respond, or?
Just off the top of my head, I'm thinking, like I said again, about my neighborhood. I live just outside of the city, and I live in a community that is, I mean, it's all over the place politically, but our neighbors right across the street are very conservative, and I don't want to say they were anti-immigration, they just didn't know anything about it. These are people who are just not as informed about the issue. And one of them came to me after the documentary and said, I had no idea that these are some of the reasons why these people are coming here. I think the assumption a lot of times is that people are coming here to take our jobs or to come and make money and then go back home, if that makes sense. We talk a lot about the migrant population, but not necessarily about the refugee population. And we don't always talk about why, even our migrant population, why they're here, what's sending them here from their home countries. So those were some of the conversations we had, and just, there wasn't that awareness.
I wanted to add, I guess my circle of friends in my church, they looked at it as well. And even, I'm thinking of even our school district. Sometimes your colleagues that do not work with refugees and immigrants in other schools don't understand it either. And so I remember, having different PDs and things of that sort, and inviting people in. I'm not sure. I know we always had some type of PD, something at our opening sessions. The ESOL programs always had a PD about different things, and it was always amazing to me when our own educators within the St. Louis public schools didn't know or didn't understand. They didn't know, and little things like how did they look at that soccer field over there? How did when that was community partners? I felt sometimes they were trying to see if we were getting something above and beyond. You all have Promethean boards in every classroom without grants, But if you don't have it in your school, you're not networking well or something. But I always felt there was a little comparison of what they're doing in that school over there where you work. So making even your own colleagues in education aware of what's going on, as well as your community. And there's a little piece of my church history in there. And so even my church members, making them understand and be aware of what's going on. And I think you mentioned a little bit about racism and homophobia and all the things that are going on, all the isms. I think also representing African American community, that you can have, they're going to be above us, because we're still struggling here as African Americans, as we see, and so they're making sure that I represent what I believe and helping them to understand. We're all valuable. We're all valuable, and even if the system makes it seem like we're not, that shouldn't be our mindset. And so understanding that all children deserve an opportunity to be successful. And it's not equality, it's equity. It's equity. Having someone say your children can't read when they don't know English, that's absurd. They don't know English, and you're telling me they're 4 years below, 6 years below in reading. They don't know English. Give me a reading test in Arabic. I won't know it. Does it say something about my mental functioning or my intelligence? No. So there are a lot of things that it's still unraveling. It's not over. And so we have to keep moving forward to inform people, to educate people, to understand. And that's what you said, the talk. In other words, I'm going to say, instead of the talk, I'm going to say conversations. Engaging is what we need to continue. So people will be informed of different things. Yeah.
Well said.
My thought, and that's a great question, Miranda, because I do think that, one of the main reasons to make this film was just to start those kind of conversations in general. And it's just so surprising to me how there is kind of this void of understanding of what it means to be a refugee and in this country in general. I think we are slowly starting to roll the film out through PBS, which is being delayed because of COVID, unfortunately, but I think they'll get back to it shortly and we'll get it out there more. But I thought, where can this film make some impact? And I thought hopefully maybe PBS, the audience, was really diverse in terms of people from all political and geographical walks of life. So I wish there was a way to get this film and any other kind of conversations or information out to a more broad spectrum of our population, because I do think we live in our kind of lanes and we hear the same rhetoric, over and over. And, how do we open our minds up to, other, facts and thoughts? So, hopefully it is a conversation starter, the film. So that was the goal.
Goal achieved. I'm so happy to see those conversations taking place more and more. That's what's really needed right now. So I'm grateful to you all for your work on this film and this conversation. Just a few last words from all of you. At the end of the day, I think we'll all agree that it's about our clients or students or about the families that we serve. And so we hope that on World Refugee Day, we will be joined by a lot of those families, because when we celebrate World Refugee Day in person, that's what it's about. We invite those families to come and celebrate with us in person and the wider community, and just have that time together with no other agenda, just to celebrate them. And so I hope that they join us. And so assuming that they do, I would love for each of you to offer any last words to the refugee families collectively that we all serve in one way or another. What message do you have for these families?
I'm just gonna say one of the lines in the film. I think Kelly said it. You know, you are loved, and you know, don't give up hope. There's a lot of people in this country that believe in you, and that's my hopefully brief. Sometimes I can go on, but I'm going to leave it at that.
I was just going to say the same thing, that there are a lot of people in this country who are very happy that you're here. And like Lori said, to work on maintaining that hope and that resiliency. That's something that I see constantly in our students, is how resilient they are. It's an inspiration to me, and it's an inspiration to a lot of people in this country.
I want to say thank you for enriching my life and for sharing your culture and your journey, all of the beautiful things about you, for sharing your ups and your downs with us. You are amazing, and nothing is impossible. Or welcome to our country. You're welcome into our hearts and our community, and just hope that others will see you as we do. Thank you.
Miranda, do you have any last words for the families that we serve?
We are so thankful for just everybody's journey. What it took to get here. We see you, and we hear you, and we want to listen to you, and we want to know your stories. And while you know, as World Refugee Day celebrates refugees for the day, we will all work to continue doing that. I think it's so important that people do know your stories, and that we share your culture, we share your history. And so please be encouraged that as an organization who is working alongside and for refugees, we want to honor you the best way we can.
And I'll end by echoing all of your sentiments. We are honored to serve you in the roles that we do, and we value you, and you inspire us every day. There are a lot of people in this country who understand that most of our families are immigrants from somewhere, and your journeys might have been more difficult than some of the journeys of our families. And for some, that's not the case. For some, we can relate to what you have been through, but we will continue to listen to you, and we will continue to work for you. And even when it seems difficult and like many are against you, remember that many are for you. And we know the power and the resilience that you have, and we thank you for that. So with that, thank you so much to all of you today. We appreciate the work that you do every day. And if you haven't checked out the film Day One, please do. It's a beautiful testament to the refugee families in our country. Thank you.